Thank you for joining me here at Grab Your Brew, and if you're new here, please like and subscribe. Welcome to part two of our five-part series of the most dangerous women in the world. This week we're going to be talking about the damsel of death and the cocaine godmother. Go ahead and grab your brew and join me as we dig in.
Cops knew who I was. After Richard Mallory died, I left prints everywhere, and they covered it up and let me kill the rest of those guys to turn me into a serial killer. I know they did because I was no professional serial killer or anything, murderer or whatever you want to call it. I wasn't professional at what I was doing.
Eileen,
I did some sloppy work, and I left
how have
prints.
you?
Aileen, also known as the Damsel of Death, was born Eileen Carol Pittman on February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan. Her parents, Diane and Leo Pittman, would shortly divorce right before her birth. And there's a lot of things that go into play as to why I personally believe they divorced, but it was very toxic, at the least, because this is very telling to me. So, Diane was a teen mother and she abandoned Eileen and her older brother Keith. Right after the divorce, and Diane's parents legally adopted the two young children, and Eileen never knew her biological father. But he was actually eventually imprisoned for child R, and he died by suicide while in custody. And of course, we all know how pedophiles are treated in prison. So he probably knew he went ahead and took the easy way out, right? Now I'm not sure how this started, but there was a fire that happened at some point that scarred her face when she was a young girl. And she also developed a very explosive temper and found it very difficult to make friends. To make matters worse, around that age of 10, she found out her grandparents were not actually her parents, which I don't understand why they tried to deceive her anyway, because this just added more tension to an already explosive child. And I don't know, I feel like that was poor adulting on their part to try and deceive her. I guess I don't know the full story behind that, and I guess we never will, but I guess this traumatized her a lot. Who wouldn't be traumatized finding out that, oh, you aren't my real parents at 10 years old? Now, it seemed that crazy did run in her family because, of course, her dad offed herself for essaying children. And then her grandfather, as a form of punishment, and I don't understand this at all, it's absolutely disgusting, but he made her watch as he drowned a poor kitten. And it was some form of punishment for some reason. I don't know how that even works out. But she also later stated, and I don't know how true this is because she also was known as a compulsive liar, but she stated that he physically essayed her grandfather did, and she also claimed that she had sexual incestual relations with her brother as a child. So, if all of this is true, I guess it's no secret as to where her hatred for men came from, because clearly, as the story progresses, you will understand that she purely hates men. And as early as 11 years old, Eileen was offering sexual favors to boys that she knew, and they would often either pay her or give her cigarettes, which way to lower the bar, but I guess she's a troubled 11-year-old. But this would result in derogatory nicknames and being called stuff like the cigarette pig. And her sex work, I can't even say lady of the night because she's 11, but it did isolate her even further from her peers. She ran away from home on multiple occasions. If all of this is true in the life that she's living, who blames her, right? Eventually, she was sent to juvenile detention. And then at the age of 14, her grandfather sent her to a home in Detroit for unwed mothers because Eileen had become pregnant. She told her family that the pregnancy was a result of rape, But then she offered a different explanation later. She gave birth to a healthy baby boy born on, I don't know the exact date, but it says March of 1971, and he was given up for adoption as soon as he was born. And I don't know how much, if this, I mean, it's got to cause her trauma, right? Additional trauma. And it doesn't state whether she actually wanted to keep the kid or not, but I think in this case it was better that he was not around. But of course, this trauma went ahead and escalated. After she gave birth, she went ahead and dropped out of school, and she bounced between a juvenile detention and her so called family home. And then she was also sleeping in the woods or in abandoned cars. Her grandmother, Britta, was somebody who struggled with alcoholism, and she died of cirrhosis of the liver as a result of this on July 7th, 1971. And after she died, the grandfather pretty much, I guess, he tied his hands of the granddaughter and he just refused to take care of her. So it looks like the grandmother was basically her only saving grace prior to this. By 1976, she was hitchhiking to California when her grandfather committed suicide. Eileen didn't attend the funeral. By this time, she had been hitchhiking across country while continuing to engage in employment of Lady of the Night. We're going to say that because I don't want to get monetized. Now, later on in Florida, she met a wealthy yachtsman by the name of Louis Fell. She was 20 years old at the time, and apparently Fell, who was 5 decades her senior. They got married in May of 1976. What we really know at this point is she hates men, but men are providing her with money. So clearly she married him for the money, right? She had issues from an early age that resulted in most of these girls tend to go for, the quote of daddy issues. They go for older men, for that daddy figure, somebody to take care of her. And he's clearly, even at the fact that she's age 20, is clearly in my eyes a pedophile because she's 20 and he's clearly an old man, right? That would be like somebody sleeping with their grandfather at the age of 20. He's, what, in his 70s, if I'm doing the math correctly? Maybe 80s? Either way, it didn't last long. Because the union was very short lived, because within a month actually, he started filing for divorce and he stated that she had a violent and ungovernable temper. He claimed that she had beat him with his cane, and her being, I guess, a manipulator, she tried to flip the whole thing and said he'd actually attacked her. The two officially divorced on July of 1976. And I think it's either the same month or really close together, but that's when her brother Keith died from cancer. Now, keep in mind, I don't know how much it's bothered her because remember, they had an ancestral relationship at some point. Eileen was arrested during the mid 1970s for assault, disturbing the peace, and disorderly conduct. In the early 1980s, she served time for armed robbery after drunkenly attempting to rob a convenience store while wearing a bikini. I think she's still in Florida at this time because let's face it, this Florida is the only place that this could pass, right? But her criminal record would grow as she also included forged checks, resisting arrest, theft, drunk driving, and all of these were performed under multiple names because she had a very big habit of using false identities. And by 1983, she was going by the name of Lee. I guess a play off of Eileen. I don't know. But I'm going to continue to call her Eileen for context sake so we don't get confused. But Eileen met 24-year-old Tyra. Tyra Moore at a gay bar in Daytona. See, I told you it was in Florida, right? The bikini thing, Florida. The two started a very intense 4.5 year relationship and began living together. And in my opinion, this relationship was, it was unhealthy to say the least. For Moore, especially. Mo was working as a housekeeper by this time, and Eileen continued to do Lady of the Night work on the Florida highway. Eileen was extremely possessive of her girlfriend and would hate any interaction she would have with anybody, friends, family, anybody. She was completely isolating her with this jealous trait. And because of this, it caused them to frequently move between various motels, apartments, motel homes, and they would just commute to Daytona and everywhere else in Florida, anywhere they could. It was during that relationship that Eileen's crime started to escalate to, well, murder. And her girlfriend would eventually actually be the one to help the authorities to stick these charges to her. Her first victim was Richard Mallory, a 51-year-old repair shop owner who was known frequently to hire ladies of the night. He was last seen on October 30th of 1989. According to Moore's testimony, the next day, Eileen told Moore she had killed a man on December 13th, 1989. Mallory's body was actually found at an illegal dumping site in the woods. This would lead to 5 more dead bodies spread throughout the months, and they were discovered over time. The body of construction worker David Spears, 43, was found on June 1st, 1990. Part-time rodeo worker Charles was age 40. He went missing on May 31st, 1990. His remains were found on June 6. On August 4th, 1990, 5 days after he was reported missing, salesman Troy Burris, I want to say Burris 50, was found dead. Charles Dick Humphreys, 56, a child abuse investigator, was found on September 12th, 1990. Walter Antonio, a trucker and reserve police officer who was in his 60s, was discovered on November 19th, 1990. Throughout this time, Eileen would often return with new possessions to pawn and cars she had borrowed. She used a variety of aliases when pawning these belongings of her victims, which made tracking her down more difficult, of course. But in July 1990, authorities examined the vehicle of Pete Sims, a 65-year-old missionary who'd gone missing the previous month. Witnesses described seeing Eileen and Moore leave the car, and prints from the door handle was a match for Eileen. By fall of 1990, reports are out everywhere that they're looking for 2 suspected murderers, and this prompted Moore to run out of fear. She left Florida and Eileen. On January 91, Eileen was arrested at the last resort bar in Port Orange, Florida. I love how Florida just has like all these fruity names. Anyway, I digress. I'm sorry. But she was caught on an outstanding charge. Soon afterwards, police did track down Pennsylvania, and she made a deal to gather evidence on Eileen in order to avoid prosecution herself and to put Eileen behind bars for good. In mid January, Eileen admitted to murdering a phone call with Moore, saying that she committed all these crimes because she was so desperately in love with her and wanted them to stay together. I don't understand how murdering all these men would help your relationship. Hmm. Would I want somebody to kill for me? Of course, in defense. But I don't want you to go out murdering people to pawn things. Like, life is more valuable than that. But anyway, she was trying to say it was out of the name of love. And she had this whole conversation with Moore against the advice of her counsel. Now, police videotaped this entire thing as she confessed to several murders. The public was purely fascinated with this case because even though we know she's not right, but they described her as the first serial killer, and she was dubbed the damsel of death at this point. Among all the people that reached out to Eileen was a evangelical Christian couple who went on to legally adopt her, which people like this are why people look at us Christians sideways because there's no logic in this whatsoever. Have no idea why you adopted her. But anyway, this be serious about yourself.
Please, defender's office to handle the appeal. There's one other thing that I want to say that I think needs to be said.
Now, a jury found Eileen, now 35, guilty of first degree murder and robbery on January 27th, 1992. The judge gave Eileen the death penalty on January 31st, 2 months later.
Lee should come clean and confess her
As Aileen
sins.
Wuornos was led from Marion County Jail, she gave no indication that she would plead no contest to 3 murder charges, instead talking about dropping her public defenders and hiring private attorney Steve Glazer. But only seconds after being named her attorney, Glazer surprised everyone and told the court that Wuornos wanted to change her plea. With her adoptive mother watching on, the nation's first known serial killer pleaded no contest to killing Dick Humphreys and Troy Burris in Marion County, David Spears in Citrus County. Legally, the no contest plea is viewed as a guilty plea, and because there is no plea agreement, Wuornos still faces the death penalty in each case. An unusual.
Aileen opted to plead no contest to the murders of Spears, Brew, and Humphreys. She then submitted separately guilty pleas for the murders of Carlos Antonio. She received the death sentence for each plea. So I don't know how many times you can kill somebody, but either way, she has a death sentence. But Simmons' body was actually never recovered, and Eileen wasn't charged for his murder. But again, what are they going to do? Just give her an extra shot of lethal injection? She's about to die. She's got a death penalty.
It was really all, none of it was true. Because in court you gave such a graphic description.
Kill again.
Griselda. She is struggling to sell 1 kilo in Miami in 1978.
Quite embarrassing. The lady was the #1 cocaine distributor in the world by 1975.
Griselda Blanco, a flamboyant woman nicknamed La Madrina, or Godmother.
A Colombian drug baroness.
A cocaine queenpin of sorts.
I would characterize her as the epitome of a cocaine cowboy.
Más conocida como la reina de la cocaína.
Griselda Blanco has been charged with 3 murders.
Griselda Blanco.
Griselda Blanco.
For the last 20 years, I've watched other people tell the story of my mother and our family. Now it's my turn to tell the real story.
Griselda Blanco. Now, I promise if I smile, it's not because I approve of anything she did, but this woman fascinates me. It also helps that one of my faves plays her in the Netflix series. But she was also known as the Black Widow and the godmother of cocaine. She was born on February 15th of 1943 in Santa Marta. She was a Colombian cocaine trafficker who, she basically created this vast empire and was a central figure during the violent drug war in Miami in the 1970s and 1980s. Although there is some confusion on where her actual birth location is, a number of sources do say that it was Santa Marta in Colombia, where Blanco was baptized. She grew up in poverty and her life of crime began as early as 11. Allegedly, she kidnapped a young boy at the age of 11 after his wealthy family refused to pay the ransom. She fatally unalived him, and she also was alleged to be a pickpocketer and a prostitute. While still a teenager, she married a small-time criminal, and the couple went on to have 3 children. However, they divorced, and Blanco was believed to have ordered his murder several years later. And in the early 1970s, she began a relationship with Alberto Bravo, a drug trafficker who she ultimately married. It was through him that she became involved in the cocaine trade, with New York City being one of their main bases. The couple began to bring the drugs into the United States by Blanco's creativity. Now, she had lingerie made with secret compartments so she could smuggle drugs as well as other mules. The couple created an extensive and highly profitable drug. However, facing drug charges, Blanco returned to Colombia in 1975. That year, she believed that her husband was stealing money, and apparently they didn't tussle like a lot of people do. I'm not going to say every couple, but they didn't tussle, but they had a pew pew fight, and this resulted in Bravo's death and gave her the name of the Black Widow. She reportedly later also had her third husband killed as well. By the late 1970s, Blanco had moved to Miami, where she made her reputation as the godmother of cocaine. Seeking to eliminate all of her competition, she displayed a brazen and ruthless tactic and plunges the city into a period of violence that became known as the Cocaine Cowboy Wars. Now, she allegedly ordered numerous murders, many of which were committed by gunmen on motorcycles, a practice she was said to have invented. In addition to the number of killings that occurred in the broad daylight, morning, noon, night, they did not care. If they wanted you dead, you were dead. And this included a shootout in a local mall in 1970.
Exactly. The minute we heard that, another Colombian drug-related machine gunning.
Right now, 2 people are dead, and there are others injured.
Inside the liquor store, one Colombian national and another non-Cuban Latin suspected of drug trafficking lay face up in a pool of blood.
But I went racing down there, and I said, I'm from the Miami Herald, what happened here? And the cops were just shocked and askance.
I have never seen in my life an extensive amount of, how would you put it?
Well, July 1979, I had been in homicide about 2 years, but this was just beyond the scope of anything anybody could have imagined it up until that date.
Well, there was this glass, there was debris all over the place. There were bullet casings on the wall, on the floor, on the shelf. It just looked like a old Western shootout.
The assailants sprayed gunfire all around the parking lot.
Did you see what happened to him when the shooting was over?
They ran.
Where?
I don't know. I was running.
Innocent bystanders dove for cover. Cars were riddled with machine gun fire.
And this, backed by such violence and sharp cunningness, Blanco became one of the world's wealthiest drug traffickers, which was unheard of a female. Even in a regular workplace in the 70s, it was unheard of a female to escalate this big. But, crime is dominated by men, but she was one of the wealthiest drug traffickers. According to reports, she smuggled more than 3 tons of cocaine into the United States annually, netting some of, in the 70s, $80 million per month. Per month. Blanco embraced her criminal persona, even naming her son the boss, the godfather. She also enjoyed an extremely lavish lifestyle and luxury homes and an amazing party. But being targeted by rivals and constantly living in fear for her and her children's lives, Blanco moved to California in 1984. However, the following year she was arrested and taken to New York to face drug charges back from 1975. She was found guilty in 1985 and received the maximum sentence of 15 years. Though it didn't really stop nothing, because reportedly she was still running her empire while incarcerated. During this time, officials looked to press additional charges against Blanco, who was implicated in more than 200 murders. In 1994, after one of her own hitmen agreed to testify against her, Blanco was charged with 3 murders, including the fatal shooting of a former enforcer of her own 2-year-old son. And the reason I paused on this is because rest in peace for that poor child, because choices of adults should not affect children. A lot of people have messaged me case files, and I really appreciate your case files. Please comment your case files below, and I would love to research. But if it involves the entirety of the case being around a child, I won't do it because it just enrages me and gets me so emotional I can't record them. But anyway, this poor 2-year-old passed away from a failed attempt on his father's life, and they were seeking the death penalty at this point. She was one of very few women to ever make it this big in the drug world, and I only touched on certain bases with her because I will eventually be making a video with just her, but I could not talk about the top most dangerous women in history without including her in it. But as you saw in the intro, his son is coming forward and is doing a documentary, and I do want to watch the documentary in its entirety as I'm diving into this case, because I do like to get all of my ducks in a row and have all of my research as true to fact as I possibly can. But I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, guys. It really helps my channel. And join us next week for part 3 of the world's most dangerous women. Thank you for joining me this week. I hope you have an amazing week, and join me next week here at Grab Your Brew.